I still remember walking through the front door that evening, every inch of me aching from exhaustion, and my mind numb with grief. Evelyn's funeral had just ended. I had held myself together all day, greeting people with a smile that didn't reach my eyes, nodding politely at their condolences, thanking them for coming. I'd been the strong one, the calm one, the one who didn't cry. But inside, it felt like a dam threatening to burst at any moment. I just needed peace. A little warmth. Maybe even a kind word from someone who still saw me as a human being. Instead, the moment I stepped into the house, I was hit with a wave of cold silence. The kind that didn't just fill a room, it suffocated it. My mother, Doreen, didn't even glance up from her spot at the kitchen table. She sipped her tea slowly, deliberately, as if she hadn't even noticed I walked in. It was as if I hadn't just buried the only woman who ever made me feel seen. "You're back," she said flatly, still staring at her mug. Not a hint of sympathy in her voice. I set my keys gently on the counter, trying to stay composed.
"Yeah."
The service was beautiful. Evelyn would have liked it. She didn't respond. No nod. No comment. Nothing. I took a few hesitant steps into the living room, and that's when I saw him, Lance, my ex-husband, still lounging on the couch like it was his throne. His legs were propped up on the coffee table I once helped pick out, in the very house I worked 2 jobs to help pay for. He didn't stand. He didn't move. He just looked at me with that smug expression I used to mistake for charm. "Heard you lost your job," he said with a smirk. Again. The way he said it, like I was some washed-up loser who had never managed to amount to anything, burned straight through my chest. I clenched my fists, swallowing the bitter sting in my throat. "Oh, don't act surprised," he added, stretching. "You were always more sentimental than smart." Before I could respond, Doreen calmly tapped a button on her phone and put it on speaker.
"Put her on," she said.
Then came the voice I dreaded most.
"Claudia."
Lance's mother. Her voice came through the phone, sharp and cold, like the clinking of ice in a glass. "So, she's back, huh?" Claudia sneered. "Maybe now she'll finally grow up. Stop chasing fairy tales." "She's had enough time to figure life out," Doreen added, still as calm and detached as ever. "But all she brings is disappointment." They weren't even speaking to me. They were speaking about me, like I wasn't even there. Like I was invisible in my own story. Then Doreen stood up, and for a second I thought maybe, just maybe, she was going to offer me a hug. A condolence. A sliver of human decency.
But instead, she handed me something.
A suitcase. It was mine. "I packed your things," she said with a coldness that stung worse than any slap. "You'll find a hotel room more suited to your new lifestyle." For a few seconds, I just stood there, frozen. This was the home I had sacrificed everything to help keep. The one I had worked night shifts and early mornings to protect. I gave up college so Lance could finish his degree. I scrubbed bathrooms and took extra shifts, working myself raw while everyone else chased their ambitions. And now, after one loss, one job slip, they discarded me like trash. Still, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I took the suitcase, nodded once, and walked out with my head high. Later that evening, I still showed up to the dinner Doreen insisted on hosting. She called it a farewell meal, as if this were some formal send-off and not a cold-blooded eviction wrapped in fake politeness. I only went because I needed them to believe they'd broken me. The dining room was filled with relatives I hadn't seen in years, some I barely remembered. Their faces were a blur of half-smiles and judgmental stares. Their eyes flicked over me, full of that sick kind of curiosity people only get when they think they're witnessing a fall from grace. "Still unemployed?" one of my cousins asked, leaning across the table with a smirk, her voice loud enough to cut through the chatter. "Maybe you should have picked a safer career," another cousin said, swirling wine in her glass, lips curled in mock sympathy. Lance just sat there at the end of the table, his arm draped lazily over the back of his chair like a man who believed he'd won. I smiled through every second of it, nodded through the backhanded advice, bit my tongue until it tasted like rust and regret. Because in my purse, folded neatly between a packet of tissues and Evelyn's funeral program, was a letter. Evelyn's final gift to me. $8 million. She had left every cent to me. Quietly. Legally. Fully. No one else knew. Not Doreen, not Lance, not Claudia, and certainly not the smug relatives who now felt so bold behind their wine glasses and their whispers. I sat there, listening to their laughter, their smugness, and I realized something powerful. I didn't need to prove myself to any of them. I didn't need their house, their approval, or their cruel brand of validation. I had the means to build something entirely new on my own. After dessert, I excused myself with grace, stepped outside into the cool night air, and called a car. By nightfall, I was in a luxury hotel suite overlooking the city. Barefoot on the soft carpet, I stared out at the skyline, this glowing, humming reminder that there was more out there. More than cruelty. More than rejection. I didn't cry. I let the silence hold me. I let the weight lift. And for the first time in months, I took a breath that didn't feel borrowed. The next morning, I was still curled up in the armchair, wrapped in a hotel robe, my coffee lukewarm but comforting. The sun was just beginning to stretch across the city, casting soft gold light on everything. I hadn't moved much. I'd barely slept. But I felt alive in a way I hadn't in a long time. Then a knock at the door. I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. Room service had already come and gone. I should have ignored it, but I didn't. I padded across the suite and opened the door. There stood Doreen. No apology in her eyes. No grief. No guilt. Just that same steely calm she wore like a mask. She was dressed like a lawyer heading into court. Tailored blazer, sleek heels, and that same unreadable expression. She stepped inside without a word, her heels clicking like punctuation marks on marble. "I thought we should talk face to face," she said, voice cold and clipped. I shut the door behind her and turned slowly. Something had shifted, and I was no longer the one on trial. Before I could say a word, Doreen pulled a thick manila envelope from her sleek leather purse and placed it neatly on the table between us. Her nails were perfectly manicured, red, sharp, and deliberate, as she tapped the envelope once with a kind of theatrical flair only she could muster. "What's this?" I asked, though I had a feeling I wasn't going to like the answer. "An itemized record," she replied with a coolness that could frost glass. "Of everything I've ever spent raising you." I blinked, unsure I'd heard her right. "Room, board, clothes, school supplies, food." She began ticking off categories like a board accountant. "Even your birthday parties." I reached for the envelope with trembling hands and opened it slowly. The first page alone made my stomach turn. Total, $391,447.68. "You're joking," I whispered, my eyes scanning the rows of expenses, dates, scribbled calculations that tried to quantify every scraped knee and school lunch. "I'm completely serious," she said, folding her hands. "You're an adult now. You've received a sizable inheritance. It's only right that you pay me back." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My voice sat like a knot in my throat, heavy and tight. So I stood up and walked over to the window, where the view of the city sprawled beneath me like a different life I could barely touch. That's when her phone buzzed on the table. She didn't hesitate, just tapped the screen, putting it on speaker. "They're here." The screen lit up with a Zoom call. And there they were, Lance and Claudia, sitting in their respective corners of smug entitlement, like judges presiding over my worth. "Morning, Kaya," Claudia chirped, her voice syrupy with mock concern. "We just wanted to support Doreen in this long-overdue conversation." Lance leaned in, smug and condescending. "I always said you'd end up proving me right. They were trying to humiliate me. Teaming up like some twisted sitcom family reunion, where I was the punchline. But what they didn't know was that while they were plotting, I had already started moving in silence." I picked up my phone from the side table and opened the email I had carefully drafted the night before. A formal request for a full internal audit of the Whitlow Family Trust, the estate Evelyn had left behind. I had every document ready, every signature validated, every dotted line accounted for. I hit send. Let the game begin. Their voices became white noise as I drifted into memory. I remembered the science camp I begged to go to when I was 11. Doreen called it a waste of money. I remembered working my first job at 14 at a local diner while other kids went to summer camp. I remembered being told I was too expensive for a new pair of school shoes. I remembered walking home from school in the rain because I had asked for a ride and was told I needed to build character. They didn't raise me. They didn't nurture me. They weathered me like a storm they never wanted to deal with. And now, they wanted payment for the damage they caused. My phone buzzed again, snapping me back to the present. A new notification, this time from my banking app. $4,200 withdrawal. My chest tightened. That account was private.
Separate.
Protected. Completely disconnected from the Whitlow estate. I clicked for more details. The money had been transferred yesterday to Doreen's checking account. I froze, pulse roaring in my ears. This wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore. This was theft. Strategic. Intentional. Sabotage. I turned slowly, locking eyes with my mother, who was now sipping water like nothing had happened, her posture still cool and composed. "I think we're done here," I said, voice barely above a whisper. Doreen raised an eyebrow. "You'll want to think carefully before you." I cut her off. "You should go." There was a beat of silence. Then she ended the Zoom call, gathered her things, and walked out, leaving the envelope on the table like a landmine. As soon as the door clicked shut, I filed a fraud report with my bank. Then I opened the family group chat, a chat that had gone quiet since Evelyn's funeral. I typed a single message. $4, 200 withdrawn from my private account without consent. Legal action is in motion. Audit request filed. You'll all hear from my lawyer soon. The reactions came in fast. A line of laughing emojis. A cousin chimed in, "Guess money can't buy class." Doreen replied, "You're being dramatic." And Claudia? "Just remember who gave you life." That was all I needed to see. They weren't just cutting me off, they were trying to bury me.
Discredit me.
Make me look unstable. Like a liar. But they had no idea who they were dealing with now. I wasn't the desperate girl begging for their acceptance anymore. I was their storm. A week passed. And then came the rejection email. Not one of those generic, "we've moved forward with other candidates" emails, but a personal note from a recruiter. She said they had heard personal concerns from a mutual connection and had decided I wasn't the right image for their firm. The words hit like a slap. They hadn't even pretended it was about my experience. Later that day, another blow. My phone lit up with a notification from a gossip blog. Heiress or hustler? The real story behind Evelyn Whitlow's fortune. I clicked the headline with shaking hands. The article was a hit piece, full of veiled insults and cruel speculation, suggesting I had manipulated Evelyn in her final years to take control of her estate. They even quoted someone anonymous. She was always good at pretending to be the lost, wounded little girl. The source?
Claudia.
Of course. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I downloaded the article and saved it to a folder on my desktop titled Proof. They wanted to play dirty?
Fine.
I had dirt, too. I had time. I had money. I had nothing to lose. 3 days later, I walked into a luxury real estate showroom downtown. The kind of place where everything smelled like citrus and wealth. The agents wore tailored suits and smiled with their eyes, but only at people they thought could afford their listings. I was dressed in jeans, a soft blazer, and no makeup. Not the look of someone who could buy a multi-million-dollar home. The receptionist barely glanced up from her desk. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked coolly, already turning back to her screen.
No, I said.
"But I'm looking to purchase. In full. Something in the $3 to $5 million range." That got her attention. She blinked up at me, blinking fast, and suddenly her tone changed. "I'll, get someone for you right away." I smiled politely. Not smug. Not arrogant. Just calm. Because this wasn't about showing off. This was about reminding myself I didn't need them. They tried to erase me. But I had just begun writing my name in places they could never touch. And this was only the beginning. But I didn't need their approval. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I wasn't dressed to dazzle, and I didn't carry the kind of purse that turned heads. But what I carried instead was power. Silent, undeniable power. I walked into that luxury real estate showroom with purpose, not pomp. "I'd like to view your villa listings," I said calmly to the receptionist, who barely glanced up from her computer screen. She looked me over, gave a forced smile, and said, "One moment, please." A few minutes later, a sharply dressed woman appeared, clipboard tucked beneath her arm, heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. Her suit was designer, her perfume expensive, and her expression unreadable. "Hi, I'm Soraya," she said, her tone clipped and distant. "I'll be showing you around today." It didn't take long for her disinterest to bleed into condescension. 10 minutes into the tour, while we were walking through a sun-drenched patio overlooking the hills, she made her first slip. "I mean, people like you usually rent, right? Or share?" she said with a little laugh, eyes scanning her clipboard, not even bothering to look at me. "You don't strike me as a buyer." My smile didn't move. I didn't correct her. I didn't tell her who I was. I simply followed her through the rooms, noting the architecture, the finishings, the view, because that's what I came for. Not her validation. We moved on. I asked her to show me the two most expensive properties they had available, both over $4 million each. She blinked, taken aback, but to her credit, she complied. Her tone shifted. She became overly polite. But it was too late. I'd seen her real face already. At the end of the tour, I requested a private room to finalize the sale. "I'd like to purchase both villas," I said, settling into the leather chair, legs crossed. "In full." Soraya's eyes lit up like a child at Christmas. "Wow. Thank you. I'll just finalize the paperwork for the commission." "I'm revoking your commission," I said, not even looking up from the transfer slip I was signing. Her face fell instantly. "I don't understand." "You will," I said simply, placing the signed papers in front of her. "You made assumptions. Now you'll learn from them." I stood up, thanked the silent assistant who had been waiting outside the door, and walked out without another word. That night, my phone lit up with a new email. Subject line: Whitlow Holdings? No message. Just that. It was from Lance. He was starting to put it together. The villas had been purchased under Whitlow Holdings, the same holding company I had quietly registered months ago. The name didn't just tie back to Evelyn's estate. It was the new home for every future venture I had planned.
I didn't respond.
I never would. A few days later, a letter arrived, handwritten on thick cream-colored paper, sealed with a gold crest. It was from Mr. Lawrence, Evelyn's lawyer. I recognized his elegant script instantly. Inside was one sentence: "If they ever doubt your worth, don't prove it. Own it." I must have read it a dozen times. Each word sank into me like ink on wet parchment. I had spent most of my life bending to fit into someone else's idea of value, twisting myself to win over people who never saw me.
Doreen, Lance, Claudia.
I gave them years of loyalty, energy, even love, only to be treated like a burden. Like I owed them for daring to exist. No more. They wanted to paint me as a fraud. I would build an empire so vast, its words would be whispers against its walls. They called me dangerous. I would become untouchable. One quiet move at a time, I was becoming something they'd never predicted. A storm. And they were still dancing in the sunshine, unaware of the thunder gathering just beyond the horizon. It was a crisp Thursday morning when I walked into my attorney's office, a thick folder pressed tightly against my chest. Inside were records, every receipt, every email, every bank transfer that proved my contributions to the home Lance and I once shared. I had kept them all, quietly, over the years. Mortgage payments, grocery bills, renovation invoices, even Venmo screenshots for utility split costs. We filed a formal property claim that afternoon. But it was more than a legal maneuver, it was a declaration. They had cast me out like I was worthless. Now I was taking back the brick and bone I helped build. By Friday morning, Lance had received the notice. He called me 3 times. I didn't answer, because by then something else had happened. Something he never saw coming. Through a network of silent investors and discreet partnerships, I had acquired 51% ownership of his company. I used the same logic he once used to shut me out, a cold strategy. By noon, the board had voted. Lance was out as CEO. The meltdown was immediate. Reports said he shouted in the office lobby, demanding someone fix it. But I wasn't there to watch. I was busy signing final ownership documents. On Saturday, it was Doreen's turn. A uniformed man knocked on her door and handed her a thick envelope. Inside was a formal repossession notice for the house she still pretended was hers. The same house I was forced out of weeks before. She called me, her voice trembling for the first time in years. "You're evicting me?" she snapped. "No," I replied, my voice calm and clear. "I'm not kicking you out. But don't mistake that house for yours again."
Click.
By Monday, the internet exploded. A coordinated smear campaign was unleashed. Screenshots taken out of context. Blurry old photos. Twisted captions. I became the clickbait villain. The woman who schemed her way into wealth, who manipulated a dying woman for millions. It didn't stop there. The final blow came when Claudia gave an anonymous interview. She accused me of seducing Evelyn, of pretending to be a daughter, of isolating her from real family. The quotes were venomous. "She's a con artist in pearls." Evelyn was too old to see it. The blogs ran with it. Hashtags trended overnight. Hashtag Evelyn scandal. Hashtag gold digger heir. Hashtag not her daughter. I watched it all unfold from my hotel suite. Sat by the window as the world twisted my name. And then, I made a decision I hadn't planned. I went live. No filters. No makeup. Just me, sitting beside the window, a stack of receipts and Evelyn's final letter on the table. "I never wanted to do this," I said softly to the camera. "But since you're all so curious, let me tell you who I am." I showed documents, screenshots. Messages between me and Evelyn were that she begged me not to leave her alone with the same people now mourning her wallet more than her life. And then my final card, a video. Evelyn's face appeared on the screen.
Calm. Kind.
Her voice was unmistakable. "If anything happens to me, know that I chose Kaya. She is my daughter in every way that matters. I trust her with everything." The live chat froze, then exploded. "We're so sorry, Kaya. You didn't deserve this. We were wrong. This is heartbreaking." Claudia, real name Judith, deactivated every account she had within the hour. Lance? He went live too drunk, shirtless on his balcony, ranting about betrayal and conspiracies. The video was clipped, memed, mocked, and re-uploaded within hours. And me? I ended the live stream with one sentence. I didn't take anything. I earned everything. Then I closed my laptop, walked over to the window, and breathed in the quiet like it was the first air I'd ever owned. Not revenge. Not victory. Just peace. It was just after sunrise when the knock came. The sky was still streaked in lavender, and the lake outside my window glistened with a soft coat of morning mist. The kind that made everything look like it had paused for breath. I had just poured water into the kettle, letting the warmth of the steam fog the edges of the window. The only sound was the gentle hum of the heater and birds testing their morning voices. Then came the knock, 3 soft taps. Hesitant.
Hollow.
Present. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door, and there she was.
Doreen.
Her hair was a tangled mess, and her face had lost its sharpness. She looked smaller, not just physically but in person. Her coat hung off her shoulders like it had been borrowed from someone stronger. She was shaking slightly, not from the cold, but from the weight of whatever had finally cracked her shell. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered, her voice thinner than I'd ever heard it. I didn't step aside. I didn't invite her in. I didn't ask questions. Instead, I turned calmly, reached into the drawer beside the door, and pulled out 2 items, a prepaid card and a printed sheet of paper. "This has enough to hold you over for a few months," I said quietly. "And these are good senior living options. You can tell them I referred you. They're kind. Her eyes filled instantly. Tears gathered in the corners, but none fell. She looked down at the envelope like it was glass. Fragile, unfamiliar, too generous. I didn't come for money, she murmured, voice breaking. I know, I said, but that's all I have to give. There was no dramatic hug, no last-ditch apology, no redemptive speech from a mother too late to mother. This wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a reunion. It was closure. She held the envelope with trembling hands. We stood there for a breath longer than necessary. Then she turned and walked away. I closed the door gently behind her. Back inside, the kettle had begun to whistle. I turned it off, poured myself a cup, and sat at the piano. My fingers hovered over the keys, searching for a melody that didn't come. I pressed one note, then another. But in the end, I let my hands rest in the stillness. No song came, just silence. And somehow that was enough. Life had continued around the chaos, just like it always does. And it had quietly tied its threads while I rebuilt mine. Claudia, once so sharp, so ruthless, was now the subject of a federal investigation. Turns out her long-standing nonprofit foundation had more holes in its books than anyone could explain.
Fraud.
Tax evasion. Misappropriation of donations. The works. She disappeared from every social circle she used to dominate like a queen. Her name only popped up now in whispered conversations and court transcripts. Lance? He was legally barred from operating any business after forensic auditors exposed how he'd been funneling employee bonuses to fund tropical vacations and luxury car leases. Last I heard, he was living out of a rental condo, his once thriving bank accounts locked behind government freeze orders. He blamed everyone, especially me. But the Mirror told a different story. And the gossip blog? They quietly issued a retraction at 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, buried in a sea of celebrity news and page ads. No apology. No highlight. Just a footnote at the bottom of a page that most people didn't even scroll to. But it didn't matter. No one cared about them anymore. People forgot them. But they didn't forget me. Sometimes, I still get messages, soft notes from strangers. A DM on social media. A kind email. A quiet thank you from someone who saw the stream, who watched the story unfold, and who recognized a piece of themselves in it. Sometimes, when I'm at the grocery store, someone will smile at me like they know me, like they remember. And sometimes they even whisper, "I'm glad you made it through." I live quietly now. My lake house is small, not flashy, not meant to impress. But every inch of it feels like it belongs to me. It's mine, not because I paid for it, but because I earned every inch of peace that lives inside these walls. I give piano lessons to local kids in the evenings. $10 an hour, and I throw in a snack if they play all their scales. There's a joy in teaching, something soft and pure, and far from anything money can buy. One of my students is the niece of Monica, the realtor, who once dismissed me during the villa tour.
She's changed.
Life softened her edges. She apologized once, awkwardly, nervously, over coffee.
We laughed about that day.
Sometimes, life doesn't circle back for revenge. Sometimes it circles back with grace. One slow afternoon, after a lesson ended early, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and a blank note card. No plan, no speech, just a thought. I picked up a pen and wrote a single sentence. I forgive you. For me. The ink smudged slightly as I folded the note. I walked outside to the oak tree in the backyard. It stood tall and wide, roots deep like history. I dug a small patch of earth beneath its shade and buried the note there.
I didn't cry.
I didn't feel victorious. I felt whole. Because peace doesn't always come dressed like a trophy. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or parades. Sometimes peace is just being able to drink your coffee while it's still hot. It's a full inhale that doesn't tremble. It's the wind brushing past your face without dragging a storm behind it. It's silence that doesn't ache. And if this story, mine, echoed something inside you, if it felt like something you've lived or feared or survived, just know this. You're not alone anymore. You never were.